Hi guys, it's Jeff here, the photographer's mentor, and here I am joined by Keltie Maguire again, Keltie the clarity coach, and this is the fourth and final webinar that we are talking about decisions, implementing strategies to improve your business, to help yourself move forward and to think and get more clarity about what you're going to do with your business and the future of your business. And if you've missed any of the previous webinars that we've done, you can just go to the hashtag that you see in the comments down there, Creating Successful Photographers. Just type that hashtag into the LinkedIn search bar, head on over to it, press follow, and then if you scroll down, you'll see this webinar and all the other 3 webinars that we've created, and I definitely recommend that you watch them. So today we're talking about prototyping, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm going to hand you over to the expert Keltie, and she can give us a bit of an idea about what prototyping is and how it can help your business. So tell us a little bit more. What's today's webinar about, Keltie?
Yes, I would love to do so. So as Jeff mentioned, today we're going to be talking prototyping and specifically how you can prototype the ideas that you have in terms of what you might want to be pursuing both professionally and personally within your business. So what you're in for today, we're going to be looking at how to test drive your ideas, aspirations, and interests. We're going to talk about what is prototyping. So I've kind of used the word test drive and explore your ideas. What does prototyping actually mean? And how does it work? How can we use this tool? And then at the end, we're going to be doing a group prototyping brainstorm session, which I hope there's a few faces on here who I had shared that we're going to be doing this with. I said, come in person. We're going to be doing some prototyping together. So I'm especially looking forward to that. All right. So to go back to this question that I help people answer in their businesses around like getting clear on what you want, how do we actually do that? We talked in week 1 about how we create our vision, and we've been talking about, making decisions and overcoming fears, but how do we actually get clear on what we want and where we're going? And without getting into it too in depth, basically there's 3 key things we need to be doing. There's 3 key ingredients for clarity, and those are self-reflection, exploration, and commitment. And self-reflection is just that. It's really reflecting on what our strengths are, what we enjoy, what we want our future to look like. I'm going to save exploration for last. Commitment is about making decisions. It's about saying, I'm going to pursue a particular course of action in order to make things happen for myself. And the third piece is we need to explore. We need to go out in the real world and we need to test drive things. And prototyping, as you'll see in a moment, is the tool that we use in order to explore and test drive our ideas.
So obviously, if anybody watched our previous webinar last week, they will have more commitment and they should be able to overcome their procrastination and make better decisions, because that's exactly what our last webinar was about, wasn't it?
Totally, yeah. So definitely check out, I would say check out weeks 2 and 3 for sure if you're wondering about that commitment piece, because we talked about how procrastination and perfectionism and those things often show up as a blocker to making those commitments. And we also last week talked about some tactics for making decisions. So certainly check that out. And I know I've had some really nice messages from a few of you say you've been enjoying the Clarity podcast. I think it's episode 8, but I talk more about these 3 ingredients and how they fit together in that episode. But I just want to mention this to sort of set the stage that there are 3 things we need to do, and we need all of them. And again, in that episode, you'll hear about why we can't just omit, self-reflection, for example. We need all 3. The thing is, and a lot of people I work with, they have this kind of notion that they can just think their way to clarity. So if they're unsure about something, let's say, they're wondering about whether they should sort of change their specialty in photography. Let's say they're doing, wedding photography and they're wondering about getting into food photography. They kind of hope if they just sit there, with a pen and paper, a journal, or if they talk it over with their friend, that they'll be able to find the answer to that question. Do I make this change? But you can spend the rest of your life, up on your meditation cushion on a mountaintop, and that in itself is not going to give you enough information in order to get clear on things. In order to gain new insights, in order to gain information, in order to figure out what's right and wrong for us and the path that we want to proceed down, we need to act. We need to take action. And the tool that we use to act and the tool that we use to explore our ideas and explore the different choices that we're considering is prototyping. And I'm going to tell you why we use prototyping and why we don't just say, great, I'm going to become a food photographer. I'm going to share why that is.
So prototyping is basically like a beta test, or as you say, like a test drive, or aiming at a smaller audience. Is that right?
Thank you for asking, Jeff. Well, what is prototyping? So prototyping has its origins in the world of design. And you've maybe heard about this. People are prototyping a new model of car, or they're prototyping a new fancy wristwatch, or they're prototyping, you name it. And what designers do is they effectively build their way forward. They sort of start with a general idea in mind, but often they don't know what that end product is going to look like and exactly whether it's going to work, how it's going to work. They have to start with something very rudimentary, and then they build their way forward and they learn as they go. So prototyping is, in effect, a way to bring theoretical ideas to life. We can also think of them as little experiments. So they're like little ways of kind of going out there and test driving things. And we can use prototyping to test products, concepts, and processes. And in the case of our conversation today, we're actually going to use prototyping in sort of a life design application. So prototyping when it comes to designing our ideal business, life, career. Now, this application of prototyping in life design actually comes from two professors at Stanford University's D School, which is the design school there. And their names are Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And they have written a fantastic book, which I'll share with you at the end as well, but it's called Designing Your Life. And if you're interested in what I'm sharing today and you think, yeah, these concepts are cool, and I like this idea of designing my life, designing my path, definitely check out that book. It's one of my top 3 must-read books. It's so helpful.
Great. I'm going to stick that on my audio list. I'll have a check.
Oh, yeah. I also have one called Designing Your Work Life, which I've yet to read. But
by the same people.
Pardon me?
By the same people? By
the same people, yeah. But I would say just reading Designing Your Life. And I should also mention, if you're in the US, or they probably even do these virtually now. I did a really great day-long not webinar, a course or a program with them all about this design work that they do, life design. So yeah, really, really cool stuff that they're doing. So why do we want to prototype? Why do we want to do this in the first place? Why not just go out there and say, I'm going to set up my business. I'm closing the wedding photography business and I'm going to set up my food photography business. So we prototype to, first of all, explore our interests, ideas, aspirations, you name it, when we have minimal data available. You might, for example, think food photography sounds kind of cool because I like photographing my dinner I make, and I think it seems like a sexy kind of interesting industry. And I don't know, I like restaurateurs and chefs. But you don't really have that information, perhaps, about what it would actually entail to be a food photographer, positives and negatives, and whether that's going to be a good fit for you. So we prototype in order to get more information so we can make more confident decisions. Prototyping is also a way to do something without overcommitting. So I usually meet 2 types of people in my work. I either meet the people who are kind of afraid to do anything because they're worried about getting it wrong or whether something's the right move for them, or they're like, okay, cool, I've finally made the choice and I'm gonna, quit my job and go all in with my business, or I'm gonna close my wedding photography business and do the food photography. And they're just ready to jump in feet first. They're gonna kind of give it all up to do it. And sometimes that's a bad idea, right? Sometimes we need to commit in small ways before we commit to the full thing.
No, so now I wish I'd prototyped the idea of owning a food pub instead of flinging all that money into buying a lease and doing the pub out, and then realized the whole dream was an absolute nightmare for 12 months until I got rid of it. So maybe if I'd gone and managed a pub for a month and got some behind the scenes of how bad it was, other than this dream idea that it was going to be a lovely idyllic country pub serving food, then maybe I wouldn't have lost all that money. But obviously hindsight's a great thing, isn't it?
Of course. And that's such a good example, Jeff. I love that you give a real, and perhaps people watching, you can think of an example of a time that you maybe overcommitted, where you could have gotten more information if you would have treaded a little bit more carefully, or perhaps just taken one step instead of run the whole marathon. All right. Prototyping is also a way to manage our resources and fail fast. And we can talk about monetary resources in the case of Jeff with a pub, for example. And we can also look at our time and energy, which we, of course, only have so much of. So sometimes We don't have to, like, for example, spend 2 years of sleepless nights trying to get a business idea off the ground, when actually within a month or two, we could realize one way or the other whether that's going to be viable for us. So with prototyping, as much as you might think it's a way to help us succeed, it's actually a way to help us fail fast.
Yeah.
If failure is going to be that outcome, we want to get to failure right away, because that's going to give us information about how we can create new prototypes and ways of doing things.
Funny enough, when I became a photographer, a full-time photographer, and full-time wedding photographer, I suppose my ex-business partner Kev, he used me as a prototype, because we were both military photographers at the time. He was married and he had 2 kids. I wasn't married at the time and I didn't have any children, so the idea was that I would hand in my notice. I would come out the Navy, leave the security of a full-time job to see if we could build up this wedding photography business. And then if there was enough money starting to come in, then he would then take that commitment and step outside. So he used me as a bit of a guinea pig, as a bit of I was a prototype.
No, but it's super smart, right? Because you both could have gone all in, but he thought, okay, here's somebody who perhaps has like less risk or on the line than he personally did. And instead of you both going all in and giving up all your time, resources, money, you were able to kind of test drive that with, less to lose. Of course, depends how you look at that, but.
Yeah, and I suppose it gave more ability for the business to grow and establish, because Kev still had a very good amount of money in his pocket each month coming from the Navy. So if he'd come at the same time, there would have been instantly a demand on the business to provide two full-time wages.
Totally, yeah. Okay, and lastly, prototyping is a way to visualize our ideas in an experiential and tangible way. So you thinking about something and visualizing something is totally different than actually going and experiencing it. Similar to what Jeff just shared about the fact that he had this, idyllic sort of view of what it would be like to run a pub. And as you mentioned, maybe if you would have managed a pub, you would have said, whoa, okay, there's like a lot of things I hadn't considered, which would have allowed you to then either decide that wasn't the right path, or maybe you would have set things up and done things differently, knowing what you learned.
Yeah, definitely.
Or could have learned. Okay, so here's what a good prototype is. And this is sort of go ahead. Were you gonna?
No, carry on, sorry.
A good prototype is, and this is sort of a checklist you can use when creating a prototype. Generally speaking, it is low risk. Okay, so we want to mitigate risk. We don't want to go all in. We want to just go a little bit in. It's low cost. Shouldn't really cost you a huge amount of money. It should be imperfect. So you shouldn't have to worry about getting everything just perfectly right out of the gate. And it should be something that you can take the first step on today. Doesn't have to be meaning you've got everything totally sorted, but maybe there's a small piece of research you can do. Maybe there's a phone call you can make. Maybe there's, you can ask a question or book a conversation with somebody. And in a moment, I'll explain what these prototypes actually look like, how they can work. But we want to be getting into motion. Prototyping is a way for us to get out there and to start acting, as opposed to sitting on our butts, waiting for everything to be just right. All right, so in very simple terms, there are 2 different kinds of prototypes we can do for life design and business design. The first is a conversation. And a conversation is simply Jeff saying, for example, to a friend of a friend, hey, you've owned this pub for the last 10 years. Could I sit down with you? I'm actually thinking about opening my own restaurant or pub. That could be a prototype, right? That's going to give him information and kind of test drive things. It's not the same thing as opening his own business, but it's going to bring him that little bit closer. So a conversation can be a really great way of doing things. Conversation could also be, I'm thinking about starting this boudoir photography business for women who feel really, or men for that matter, but who feel very uncomfortable in their body. And it's a new concept and way that I'm going to be working with clients. Conversation might be sitting down with 5 women to say, like, what are you most insecure about at the thought of being photographed in a boudoir setting? Okay, that's another example. Right. The other way we can prototype is through an experience. And this is really getting more out there and actually physically doing something to get more information. So the example that Jeff gave about actually going and working in or managing in a pub would be an experience. Deciding, for example, maybe Jeff really loves, serving up pub food, and he's going to get a stall at an upcoming outdoor festival. And that's going to kind of give him a sense of maybe what it would be like to operate a pub. That could be an experience. He's not starting his own full business, but he's going to do something over a weekend or a couple days in order to get more information. All right, so when we prototype, the best way of prototyping, if you have this available, is to prototype with a group of friends or peers. And the nice thing is you all have this amazing community together, both here on LinkedIn as well as in the Facebook group. And so I would encourage you, especially those of you who watch this and will understand this language, the next time you want to test drive something is to do a prototyping brainstorming session. And we do this by, first of all, posing a question. And the question can simply be, how might I prototype whatever it is you're wanting to prototype? And there are better prototype questions, and there are ones that are less effective. And better prototype questions are going to allow the people who are contributing input and ideas to be broader as opposed to more narrow. So let me show you what I mean. You might say, and I know we talked about this last week, wanting to maybe have your own photography studio. How might I prototype having my own studio? Okay, that's not a bad question to ask, and it's probably going to elicit a few different answers, but that's something very specific that you're looking to explore. A better example could be, how might I prototype hosting my clients in a dedicated space? It's not quite the same thing, but if you look at this first question, I would suggest that at the heart of this question is really maybe that desire to have people in your own space, or maybe it's wanting to have all of your equipment in one place. So I kind of encourage people, as opposed to saying, how can I prototype opening my own coffee shop? You might say, how can I prototype working with coffee or exploring, the world of coffee? That's going to probably bring about new, fresh ideas in a better way than going right for that specific idea right away.
It's funny you should mention coffee, but Peter's just said he had the same thing. He wanted to open a cafe until he went to learn how to be a barista and saw the ins and outs of managing a cafe. And then obviously, did that put you off completely, Peter? And so did you knock that idea on the head? Because I know quite a few of my clients, when we come into pricing and stuff, I think prototyping is a great way of working. Don't go all in and get this beautiful, lavish brochure with all your packages put together. Start prototyping your packages first, because you can try them on different types of geographical clients and demographical clients.
Totally. Yeah. And with that, that might look like pitching it at a certain rate and pitching it at another rate. It could be talking to other photographers to see what their experience has been. It could be, a multitude of different things. It could be packaging up your offers in a different way to make it more enticing. So I think it's always smart, because like you say, you go create these glossy brochures, you got to pay the designer, you've got the time and money. You probably are going to procrastinate on doing that for the next weeks or months. And at the end of the day, you might learn that was the wrong price point. You should have gone higher or lower. And now you've got all of this money invested in all of this physical waste, really, that you could have avoided. So to address this second question, how might I prototype hosting my clients in a dedicated space? You could host a pop-up studio. Maybe you're going to host a studio for 2 summer months and kind of see how it goes, how you like that. You could maybe rent or borrow a space just on certain days each week. So maybe there is a, co-working space that is available on the weekend, and you're going to try renting that out for the next 6 months. You could talk to other photo studio owners. Like, maybe this is just an idea you have in your head because this is what you associate with a true photographer. And you're going to realize that actually that's not really the way the industry is going, and it has a lot of downsides. And maybe you'll realize after those conversations that you don't want a studio. Maybe you use another studio owner's space while they're on holidays to sort of test drive it. Maybe you create a home studio and you say, like, hey, it's not commonplace, but I'm in a space where I'm comfortable having trusted clients come in 1 day a week. Or maybe you look for some sort of unconventional space that's regularly available. So maybe it's not a photo studio, but maybe you are working out of a restaurant before they open for the evening. Maybe you're there in mornings and it offers you a chance to photograph the, XYZ business owners that would be perfectly suited to that sort of environment, okay? So we're going to do this exercise in just a moment, but I want to give a few guidelines, if you will. When you come up with prototypes, I want you to go for volume. So you might, for example, be like, oh, Keltie, you don't really understand. You couldn't just use another studio owner's space because another studio owner isn't going to want you in there because, okay, this is not the time for that. I want you to just come up with ideas, because sometimes the ideas that seem most unreasonable or the least likely, those are the ones that are, if not going to be the right idea, at least it's going to inspire thinking in a new way. So you're going to go for volume, as many ideas as possible. As I've just alluded to, you're going to defer judgment and limitations. So I don't want you to start coming up with prototypes. Let's say you're thinking about relocating your family to Paris, and one of the ideas is like, go live in Paris for a month. And you might say, well, that's not really going to work, because no, I want you to withhold judgment. I want you to build on the ideas of other people. So maybe I said something in one of these suggestions. You're like, well, I don't know about that, but what about if you actually did this? So we can build on what other people suggest, pardon me. Okay, so we're going to prototype in just a minute. Now, I'm going to, because I can't see any of you right now in my presentation, I'm going to close the presentation in a second. But before I do, I just want to leave you with a couple of resources around this topic. As I mentioned, that's the name of the book, Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. Highly suggest checking it out. And then the other thing is you can tune into the first episode of my Clarity podcast, which is called How to Prototype Your Ideas. And it sort of reiterates a lot of what I've shared today. It's going to give some more examples. And as it happens, this is actually a prototype. This was a prototype to see if I wanted to create a podcast. And when you listen to it, I explain how that worked and how I test drove wanting to start a podcast. All right, so I'm just going to close this, and then I'm going to explain how we're going to do this exercise. So let me stop sharing. So what I want to do first of all is for anybody, or yeah, we do have some people watching live, which is great, because otherwise it'll be Jeff and I prototyping together. I would love for you to ask the question about something you want to prototype. So again, the sentence starter is, how might I prototype? And then I want you to ask what you want us to prototype. And it doesn't have to relate to your business. It could be like, how could I prototype, I don't know, getting into CrossFit, or how can I prototype whatever it may be? How can I prototype moving overseas? I want everybody watching, and of course I can't see if you're there, but I want everybody to submit a question. And there's no pressure. Like if you don't feel like, I don't know if this is the right way to ask, put it in the comments. That's the first step. Okay. So I want how might I prototype? I just want one of you to do that.
How did the prototyping of the podcast go? Then obviously it worked because you still did it.
Well, and so funny enough, people listen to it. They're like, that's a pretty good prototype. I'm like, I know, I feel like I cheated, because it turned out pretty decently well. But I mean, I really, first of all, talking about doing things really simply and kind of in a rudimentary way, I used my iPhone voice memo note, which for those who listen to my podcast, I still use the voice memo note to record my podcast. It's the most basic thing, but it works. I just use the mic on my iPhone headset. I was like, I don't need a fancy mic. I'll just use this. I think that's what I did. Or maybe I borrowed a mic from a friend. But the point was, I said, I'm not going to invest money. I'm just going to borrow something. I didn't have any ideas about how to actually disseminate the podcast in terms of getting it on Spotify or iTunes. It really, for me, was just playful. And so I just shared the original episode on my website. Like I didn't have a proper podcast in which to send it out. And yeah, I just kind of ran with it, and it was cool. And I got good feedback, and I thought, okay, this shouldn't be that hard. But the good thing is it got me in motion. It got me recording that first episode without worrying about the specifics and the details of how this was going to work and how this was going to look. Okay. So Hannah has a question. I'm going to wait. I would love to have one or two more questions here, but Hannah says, how might I prototype which website design will work well with my clients? Okay. So I'm just going to wait one more minute. Play along, friends. It will be much more fun if we do. Otherwise, okay, how could I prototype getting into remote photography? That's a cool question. Okay. I'm going to wait one more minute because I know some of you are sharing. And can you actually see, do you know how many people are on here live right now, Jeff? Because I can't see.
It doesn't say. It did last time, but it doesn't appear to be on here now.
It's funny. Yeah, yesterday when I was doing a live, I was like, I don't know if anybody's there. I can't see any comments. Kind of like talking into the void. Maybe I'll give one more example of a prototype. So my husband, a couple of years ago, he was interested. We really love stand-up paddleboarding, and we've just bought boards recently, but because most of the lakes are outside the city, some of them you can rent a board right on the lake, but it's not very easy to get a paddleboard to use like it is in Vancouver, where you just go down to the ocean front and there's places. So he wondered about renting paddleboards, like starting like a brick and mortar paddleboard rental service. And I, of course, was like, why don't you just do a little bit of prototyping before you spend all of our money on paddleboards and figuring out where you're going to sell them from? So he actually connected with a few stand-up paddleboard operators in Germany and Europe, none of whom were in the market here. So one suggestion I have for you if you're doing conversations is to be a little bit careful. Sometimes people can perceive that you're trying to, eat their lunch, so to speak. So he didn't call up a Munich stand-up paddleboard operator, but he reached out to a few people and just said, I'm interested in maybe getting into this business and I want to talk to you. And he actually had 2 or 3 different people who said, yeah, no problem. Give me a call this evening, whatever. And he learned really quickly there were a lot of considerations, a lot of headaches, and very little money to be made. And thankfully, that was that with that idea. So just those conversations alone gave him so much more info, as opposed to him like just spending all this time and money figuring things out and then potentially launching a business that may not have done very well. Okay, so this person, Bolzana, says, I'm a headshots photographer working in a small studio. How can I prototype to be working only on location and get rid of the studio? Okay, so pick a number between 1 and 3, Jeff.
3.
3, okay. So we're going to go with number 3, and that is, Bolzana's wondering again, how can she prototype working only on location and getting rid of the studio? So I would love, and Jeff and I will come up with a couple of ideas too, but put your ideas in the comments. Like, I want you to just say, what do you think? What do you think Bolzana might do? And again, just go for volume. Don't worry about whether it makes sense. Maybe you don't know much about headshot photography, but I want you to put out some suggestions.
Well, funny enough, how I could potentially relate to this is, and I said I had the pub, and the pub was so stressful, and it was a huge, £120,000 I lost in that, plus about another 60 on top. It was a huge financial investment and a lot of time, a hell of a lot of time. There was 18 staff as well. So to minimize the stress level, what I started doing was reducing the pub down to a couple of days a week where we decided to close, or we would have like a half day, which were days, but then volumize the other days. So this is potentially something that Bolzana could do with her studio, is maybe have 2 or 3 days a week where the studio is shut, and those days she dedicates to maybe doing corporate headshots in people's premises. So even if she isn't at the studio, there's no heat, light, and power. People aren't turning up expecting to see her there. She knows, and then that could, eventually be the switch over to closing the studio for good.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I like that you said that also, because it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? Like, it sounds like she does want to get rid of the studio, but maybe she doesn't. And so for her, doing a couple days a week on location could be helpful. Maybe it's, similar to one of the suggestions I made, maybe it's actually subletting or whatever to another photographer. So sharing the space. Maybe it's renting it out to an entirely different business for a time, just because perhaps that space that you don't necessarily want to let go of until you're certain about it. What about some other ideas? Okay, Ella says, questionnaire for the existing clients if they would mind doing location photo shoots with you. Yeah, a survey could be good. Are you interested? I think, without stating the obvious, I would just start doing it to see how you like that and to do more of that. I would talk to different types of businesses that, for example, like a law firm or an accounting firm, companies that have a pretty large volume of people who need these, where they're all in one place.
I think, if you were to package something up and create a package within your services, where the package, at the moment you may be doing headshot and studio portrait photography, but then if you create a new package called We Come to You package, where is, you sell the benefits of that. So it takes the stress out of it for the person. They don't have to find parking. They don't have to leave an hour before, if you're right in the middle of the city centre. So you taking the stress away from them, minimising their stress, and you come into them. So you sell the bonuses and the benefits of you going out to their premises or their home to do their headshots that way.
Yeah, I think there's huge benefits. I also think, authenticity is obviously this big buzzword, but I think being photographed in your actual place of work or your studio or whatever, to me, that has more authenticity than, like, let's say me being photographed here in front of my bookcase, as opposed to being in an environment where it like looks like I'm in my fancy studio, but like that's the same fancy studio you use for all your clients. I agree with Jeff, really selling those benefits. Even things as simple, women, for example, men too, sometimes with like hair and makeup, getting that done, having it all in one place as opposed to then having them go somewhere else could be helpful. Let's see what else. Any other ideas before we move? We're going to do one or two more of these. So if you have any other ideas for Bolzana for how she can test drive that, definitely put it out there.
The potential place is, and I know I've actually done this. I did this with the boudoir. So when we did the boudoir, we had the boudoir studio, and we did a lot of sort of like we had a brilliant setup for the boudoir. But when I was looking at selling the business and coming out the business to go down a different direction, one idea that we looked at for maintaining and carrying on was to use a third location. So like, you could do the boudoir in a really exclusive hotel, but between sort of like 11 and 2, between the turnaround times. So, the hotel's making a bit of money from you renting that particular nice room. It's a beautiful room. The lighting's very controlled, and you're still managing to provide the services, but you don't have the studio that way. So maybe looking at another location that you can use as like not like a pop-up location, but a once a week location, so you can offer to your clients, I come to you, I come to a place of your choice, but then once a week I also set up here and it might be a business co-working space that has that very sort of clinical sort of feel, like a studio, the white walls and the white background and stuff like that, if you want to go down that route too.
Yeah, and I think that's a smart idea, just even thinking about the co-working space. I don't know exactly who you do headshots for, but I think looking at other places or events that have those types of people, co-working being a great one. A lot of those people may very well need your services. It's not just about your own clients coming in, but you might be able to take advantage of that. I would also look, and events is kind of a sore topic right now with COVID, but like I think about how I used to go to mostly women's, mine's with men, networking events in Vancouver that might have like 100 or 200 women, and we're having a glass of wine and we're listening to speakers, and to have somebody, doing headshots at an event where you're relaxed and you're a bit dressed up, I think you could definitely leverage other types of events and conferences that are happening, as opposed to just thinking about a location as being somebody's like static office space, for example.
Funny enough, I have a client in the US who obviously he's not doing as much at the moment, but he has a LinkedIn profile, and one of the parts of his LinkedIn profile company pages is an event headshot photographer. So what he does is he hires his services out to event stall owners. So say, for instance, you're a big stationery business, and you are exhibiting at this big business networking event. You can hire to have Hector come along to stand at the side of your stall. He brings his lights, a little pop-up small studio, and he takes headshots of the clients who are at your stall. What that does is it creates a real buzz around the stall. Lots more people are hanging around, and because people are waiting for the end result of the photographs, they're going to be at the stall for longer. And then what that does is, people come into the exhibition hall and they go, oh, what's going on down there? There's lots of flashes, there's lots of people around there, so it actually draws more people to the stall as well.
Yeah. Good suggestion. And I'm reading Bolzana's comments so she says it's mainly private people for LinkedIn. She says, I'm afraid they expect to be photographed in a studio. I'm going to put my coaching hat on and say, okay, is this expectation true? Where does that come from? What is that based on? Because I can tell you personally, I've had photography done for my business, and I've never thought that I would be photographed in a studio. Now, I live here in beautiful Munich. There's lots of interesting surroundings. Certainly, there's cafes, there's co-working spaces, there's indoor spaces as well. But I personally have never thought about being in what I view, and this is probably an incorrect stereotype, but a very stark, basic environment, when I could be somewhere that has a lot more personality and that can reflect my personality. So in this case, I would, suggest talking to people, like, where would you want to be photographed? If you had any option, like where in your city or town, and, it looks like you're in Krakow. Sure. I haven't been there. I'm sure it's also beautiful. would you be interested? Try a pop-up or a test thing. I'm going to be photographing, here a lot of photographers use the Pinacothèque de Moderne here in the city, but like I'm going to be doing mini shoots by the Pinacothèque on Saturday. Every shoot, it's $99. You get your favorite 5 images. I have no idea. I'm going to be taking 8 sessions during the day. Like, see if there's an appetite or an interest for that. But my guess is it's you limiting yourself more than your clients limiting you, if I had to speculate. I don't know what you think, Jeff. I'm not a photographer.
Yeah, I mean, when I had going back to the boudoir studio, the boudoir studio was run from my house, and I had it was a 3-story Edwardian house on the seafront, and the boudoir studio was at the side of the house. It had a separate entrance, but people had to come and park up outside the front of the house. So, initially I thought that would be off-putting for people, but they actually liked it. People were like, I feel a bit more that I'm not going to be walking in the studio with loads of other people looking at this because I'm coming here to get into my lingerie. So that they believed it was a lot more personal. And we had people traveling from Glasgow, from London, from Edinburgh to our studio in the Northeast because they had that personal service. So you can really make it more bespoke. If it's not a studio, you can tailor it to sound more bespoke and more personal, and that they're not just, it doesn't feel like they're walking into a waiting room sort of area. There's perks for both sides, for the studio side and for the non-studio side. But yes, it's just a case of making that your USP.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like Jeff said, really thinking about the benefits for the client, and also, you can maybe have options. Like you might have 3 to 5 favorite locations you shoot at, which, I'm guessing most photographers have their favorite spots. But it also becomes part of that process, for a person to be asked, especially if you're doing, more kind of personal brand photography. You said there's a lot of people here on LinkedIn to think about, like, where would you want to be photographed, to give suggestions? Do you have a favorite coffee shop? Do you have a favorite, set of steps in the city? Is there a museum or a gallery or whatever? I think makes that really exciting. And I think it, if anything, potentially offers a more boutique experience that you could charge more for. That's just my. Okay, awesome. And a couple more suggestions from people here. We've got, find a friend who might be willing to have you come to their location and shoot a few of their colleagues. Offer to do it for free so you can work out your logistics and build your portfolio. All right, great suggestions. Okay, let's do one more before we wrap things up today. So let's see. Here's a fun one. How can you prototype doing slates, which are 5-second video recordings of actors? So they're interested in doing slates. I don't know anything about that. Leave some suggestions. And it just says LinkedIn user. I'm afraid I don't know who that is, but if you can leave LinkedIn user a response, how might they prototype slates?
So is this like as a service to provide to future actors? So what we do is potentially do some test shots or some test shoots with friends to see how it comes across to that particular community. So what you can do is you can use, one good thing is to use LinkedIn search. So that use LinkedIn search to find people who are actors or within an acting career in your particular area. And then once you've produced a few of these, why not send them out and ask people for feedback? A good way to, a lot of people said, I think in photography, we get a lot of things where people say, come and do this event for us. It'll be great publicity. Come and do this for free. I always say, no, I don't do stuff for publicity. I choose where I would do something for free. And if you can do something for somebody who potentially has a big following on LinkedIn, is quite well known, and then you can use their authority and their exposure to help build yours, then great. And a perfect example of this was I did some work when we got into the hospitality trade photography. Before that, we'd done a lot of building sites, we'd done a lot of construction, but we wanted to get into hospitality. So instead of going along to Joe's Diner or a local cafe and say, well, can we do a shoot for free? We went to the local Marriott hotel because everybody knows Marriott, it's a well-known brand. So we went and said, look, what we'd like to do is offer you the option of £1,000 worth of photography for branding for your hotel that you can use across any media and in brochures. The copyright is effectively yours to do what you want with, the images can be used under license to do what you want with. But on this occasion, we'll waive the charge. All we ask is we can use those images in return in our own marketing. And then all the images we created, we made sure that, we did a photograph of the girl at reception desk with the Marriott clock behind her, and she had the Marriott badge on. So we were using Marriott's authority and branding to put into our brochure, so that when we marketed to Best Western or Hilton, they would look at the images and go, oh, we've been working for the Marriott. So is there anybody who you can say, right, I'm doing these slates, there would normally be £500 or £700 or £1,000 or £1,500 or whatever. I'm going to offer you and another actor friend or something like that a chance to record these, and I'm going to waiver the charge. If you then allow me to use them, you put them onto your LinkedIn, and you can also let me access some of your network or give me some referrals of people who you think might be interested in them.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Leave some comments, friends, here, please. Let's come up with some ideas. I wanted to add, you might also look, for example, at like an acting school or program or something like that. It could be fun for them. It might not be as high profile, but if you're wanting to kind of get that experience, these are people who are going to be eager. They'll probably be like, yeah, amazing. I would love to have something like that. They may not necessarily have the money at this point, but it could create some great content for you to then be able to leverage to promote them. I would also ask around, because I feel like, I'm from Vancouver, where we have a lot of people who are actors and aspiring actors, but you just never know who knows someone. And I find sometimes the best way to get that higher profile person or somebody with a lot of credibility is to really tap into your network to see who you might be able to get access to. So
I think as well, you've got to look at, a lot of, obviously actors will have their own professional associations, and that association will more than likely have a professional association Facebook page. So you could actually, go along, request to have access or request to join the group, or contact the admin of the page and say, look, I'm looking for a few. I'd like to put this offer out to your group members. It's a benefit to them, and then do maybe an offer out. I'm prepared to work with 3 actors and waiver the charge. So this is, you could potentially be getting access to 200 or 300 clients within it, and it also puts your name out there as well.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, there's definitely associations, guilds. I don't know if a union would do this, but like every actor, at least in North America, has to be part of a union if they're going to be doing work. So that's a great suggestion. You also might look at like networking with other people who work in either, if you're looking at stage theater or film and television, the other people who work in that industry. So if you know somebody who does cinematography, somebody who does hair and makeup, like a hair and makeup artist could be a great person because they're kind of that touch point, and you might even be able to do some sort of collaboration with them where they're also going to be able to get publicity because their work is being worn on the person being featured. So, maybe it could even be partially like subsidized by a makeup artist because they're also getting to utilize that content. I don't know. All right, less ideas on that one, but hopefully that gives you some thoughts to kind of get things moving. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching the replay, because I know a lot of people have been watching the replays, please make sure you tag anybody we've seen here who've shared a prototype idea, tag them with answers or reach out to them, because oftentimes we can't really see beyond our own sort of field of vision, and having input from someone else can be super invaluable, especially if it's somebody who maybe works in a different sort of niche or market than you do. So, all right. Well, that's all for prototyping today. Thanks, Jeff. I loved hearing all your ideas on things.
No problem. And out of interest, if Peter, who asked about remote photography, if you want to drop me a message, I can. Obviously, I'm the UK and US ambassador for Shutter App, the virtual remote photography app. So if you want to drop me a message on LinkedIn, I can leave you a few voice clips and give you some advice specific to your question there on remote photography.
Good idea. Yeah. And I know you mentioned, I think there's a couple other people in this network who are doing a lot of that. So maybe you can connect them together and see if they can give each other some suggestions. Definitely. Perhaps share clients if they've got different types of audiences. So, okay. Well, thank you for having me over these last 4 weeks, Jeff. It's gone.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been really, really good. And it's made August very different, something to look forward to every Tuesday, coming in and doing this live at 2:00. So it's going to be a miss next month not having me live at 2:00 on the Tuesday. Sure.
Well, so it's not next month, but at the beginning of October. And what I'll do is I'll share the link in the group here, and then I'll also share it in, on this thread and in the Facebook group. I'm going to be hosting a 3-day challenge at the beginning of October called the 3-Day Clarity to Create What You Really Want Challenge. So if you found that this these sessions interesting. It's a free challenge. Basically, every day there's a mini training, and then I'm going to be giving you like a small piece of homework so you can really start to clarify the direction that you're heading in and how you can take steps to make that future that you're after happen. Check it out. I usually have about 100, 150 people sign up for this, and it's always a lot of fun. So I'll include the links here in the group, and you'll also see a lot of posts from me over the coming 4 or 5 weeks before the challenge happens. So it should be on your radar.
Well, thank you very much for this, and obviously have a fantastic time away when you come back home at the weekend, aren't you? For
I went to Canada for the first time in 2 years from Germany. So we leave Saturday. So I'm just trying. I've got my double vaccination, but I'm like trying not to catch COVID by hunkering at home. I keep hearing about all these people who are vaccinated catching COVID, and of course they're not going to let me on the plane if I get sick. So I'm sure I'll be fine. Getting all the odds and ends done with work, and then looking forward to taking, for the most part, the next 3 weeks off. So
I'll have a fantastic time. I hope the weather's good as well, better than we've been having in the UK anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was telling Jeff. He's like, how's the weather? I said, it's quite chilly, hence me wearing a sweater in August. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.
Brilliant. Thanks again, guys.
Bye.